Well, thanks, Douglas. You know, they say that imitation is the highest form of flattery. One of the interesting things about NASA, and sometimes I think we get a little jaded by it, is we do extreme things every day. Whether it's trying to figure out how to manage a Fed traveler or fill out your time card. No, seriously, the things that we do are always cutting edge. And I think the public expects that of us. But what we're seeing now, these days, are the public taking it upon themselves to become extreme like NASA. And so the things that we see are happening are imitations of NASA. That tells me that we've got it right, that we're looking forward to the future in the right sort of way, that we're doing the right sorts of things. And one of the really cool things that happened that you all know about was the Baumgartner jump from, they say, the edge of space. It was like 24 miles, but it was still extreme. And I'm sure they'll tell us, I think it's like 880 miles an hour was the top speed this fellow made. I think that that is a high form of flattery to NASA, and at the same time, we should applaud the work that they did in order to get there in a way that NASA probably wouldn't have. And so I think as we work together, we can learn things from both them and they can learn from us. And that, I think, is a spirit of collaboration that will take us into the next space age. And JSC is well suited to be right at the forefront of that. So with that, I think what I would do is introduce our two speakers. Why don't they both come up here? We have Dr. Andy Walsh and Art Thompson. And I'll read their bios for you, and then we'll just turn the whole time over to them. There'll be a period of Q&A afterwards, and then I think Douglas is going to come back and wrap up. Dr. Andy Walsh is a native of Australia and has a PhD in applied biomechanics and extensive coaching experience in performance training, including the design of a highly successful performance program for the U.S. Olympic ski and snowboard teams. He came to Red Bull Stratos as a director of high performance for Red Bull's Global Athlete Development Program, where he works with hundreds of international athletes, supervises a team of industry-leading sports scientists, nutritionists, biomechanics experts, and sports psychologists, and develops elite sports performance models. As performance manager for Red Bull Stratos, Andy and his team helped Felix Baumgartner execute a performance plan by encompassing both physical and psychological readiness and provide high-performance direction and support for the entire mission team. Art Thompson, on, I guess that's stage left, right? Possesses more than 3 decades of experience in innovating leading-edge design and has produced major milestones in aerospace history, including the development of the B-2 stealth aircraft. A California native, he studied engineering at the University of California, Los Angeles, and attended the University of Laverne and Northrop University. It was while working for Northrop Corporation that he served on a team brainstorming ideas for an aircraft that could avoid radar detection. Their design would become the B-2 Spirit. Art co-founded his own company, Sage Cheshire Aerospace Incorporated, to provide a wide range of aerospace needs from initial design and engineering to the finished product. Art's creative thinking extends to other fields, including producing tools, molds, digital products, and more for clients from aerospace manufacturers to movie producers for films like Batman and Robin, for which Art and his team built the Batmobile. That's awesome. Did it go as fast as Felix? No. As technical project director for Red Bull Stratos, Art Thompson assembled and guided the extraordinary team that designed, built, and tested the capsule that protected Felix Baumgartner and assured mission success. So, please join me in welcoming Andy and Art to the stage.
Well, thank you very much. I must echo Jim's comments there. At Red Bull, we consider ourselves fairly good at the extreme in the action sports world, but to speak to you guys who do push the limits of the human and performance realm every day in your business, it's a distinguished pleasure and honour to be here today and speak in front of you. And also, on behalf of myself and Art, I just want to preface the whole thing by saying, as with you guys, our project was the culmination of a magnificent team of individuals, 200 plus on site, and then globally several thousand people who activated the program after it was successful. And just want to recognise their contribution here today, as well as sort of give you the nod that we're just representing them, and it's a pleasure to do that as well. So the program today, for us, we sort of toyed around with a couple of ideas, and what we wanted to start with was, I think, speak a little bit about the high-performance platform that Red Bull has in place. I think that speaks to the culture of our organisation and how our job in trying to manage excellence, how we try and structure systems and processes to get the very best out of people, how that lended itself perfectly to what Art and under his direction the Stratos program was trying to achieve. So forgive me, the engineers in the room, I'm not going to be very technical. Art will take care of that part, but I wanted to speak a little bit more about the framework, the processes, the platforms we use to set the whole thing up, and maybe give you an insight into our world. So with that, I thought I'd kick it off very quickly with a short video. It's a bit of an internal highlight reel, but it just gives you a sense of the sort of breadth of activities that we're engaged in. Maybe? Houston, we have a problem. I was dying to say that. I was dying to say that. There we go. Sorry, I bet you get everyone up there. I couldn't help myself.
You kept asking how you're going to do that.
If you're going to stay around and be safe for your whole life, then you never really lived and you're already dead.
A pretty indescribable feeling.
It's a big Snoop Dogg, and this is Sound Clash, so stay tuned.
Red Bull, they've been trying to push boundaries musically.
The MC in me wants to see, like, who's gonna be the sickest individual.
There's never a circumstance where there's no consequence.
Fun stuff, huh? And a big part of what we do is all about having fun. So what you've got to consider too is the fact that in my role as sort of managing the talent in the organisation is I've never before been in amongst a group of individuals with such an ability to push beyond what is expected to be the norm, to push their own limits, to defy what we want every day to see in the normal population and how they go along and push to see and break records, do amazing things, and really set the tone for the rest of us. And interestingly enough, we have about 600 athletes in our athlete portfolio and about 185 different sports, all who are world class. We have an amazing culture program, dancers, artists, musicians, designers, numbering the hundreds to almost 1,000. And from all those groups and from all those individuals, what we've been struggling to understand is how they do what they do. And so when we first started this program out, we just set up a platform where we could actually systematically look at why they're successful and what they do and how they do it so well, and bring that back and share it with the rest of the portfolio. So today, I want to speak to you a little bit about that with reference to Stratos, and then obviously, as I said, lead into Art's sort of more technical piece. So really quickly, as a framework, and I'll talk athletics at the beginning because it's the easiest part, I think, for most people to understand. Typically, when you're trying to break a world record, you're trying to win a gold medal or become a world champion, the models are fairly simple. You may choose tennis or golf as your profession. And the idea is that you typically, as a starting point, you go out and you see what the rest of the world at that level is doing. Pretty straightforward stuff. You may model yourself off Venus or Tiger. You may want to understand how they train, how much they're coaching, what they eat, how they practice, how much they practice, where they practice. And that's what we call a baseline program, and this was sort of the norm for many, many years. When we started at Red Bull, with this depth of talent that we had in our portfolio, it became very obvious to me very quickly that this was an unprecedented opportunity to broaden this sort of analysis. So rather than just framing up excellence based on models in a chosen field or even related fields, we just started to frame up our models of excellence based on best in class across any behaviour or chosen skill set. So for an athlete population, rather than looking at other athletes or other people in that sort of field, we started to broaden our sense of research, if you like, to start to look beyond that. So very simply, you know, creativity, innovation. We're not going to talk to most of the athlete population about how to improve that, even though it is a fundamental skill of the best athletes in the world. The best talent in the world on the sporting field is highly creative, is very innovative. It redefines how you understand that sport to be played or demonstrated. So we started tapping into our musical program and our culture program and the musicians. Spirituality was a huge component of this, understanding the ideas of presence and mindfulness, how to be quiet in those really critical moments. And again, we wouldn't look to athletes per se, or even musicians. We thought, who's the best in class at that? And obviously the Eastern philosophies gave us an amazing framework there. Performing under pressure, ability to execute with zero room for error. We have an amazing relationships with the Department of Defense and some of the Special Forces groups who access their talent. They access our talent, we access theirs. And then the explorers, as you guys are obviously experts in, they became a fundamental theme for us as well. Understanding how those people who go beyond what is expected, those people who see things that other people don't see and then have the courage to back that thought with action and try and understand that together and bring it all in. Is this making sense? So that's how our models are framed up now, and that's what we're continually trying to expand and continually adding data to. Some is very highly quantitative, some is very qualitative, and you'll see a bit today of both. So a model, let me go back, sorry. A model might look something like this for any given performance, and this is again focused conceptually on athletics, but we would break out a model for any given chosen craft or activity or any team or whatever it is we're trying to excel in, and we basically say, what's the subset of skills? In golf, we may say, okay, we want you to putt like Tiger. But from a physical component, we say, you know, we want you to have the physical stamina and capacity of an 800-meter runner. We may want you to have the psychology of the Dalai Lama, the presence and state of mind. And so we started to build these models, and very quickly what it showed us was it was a really powerful tool for two reasons. One, these models of hypothetically world-class athletes and people that we were generating that don't exist were future-proof. They set a goal. We created the sort of fantasy golfer, if you like. No one with that capacities in all domains existed. So no matter who we benchmarked against it, they had an ability to strive to become that person. So it future-proofed our models. And the other thing it obviously set us up for was the idea of the interaction and communication between all the parties and how to balance the integration of all these different training and components such that we got excellence in the field of play. Obviously our models, and I'll rip through this pretty quickly, depending on the sport or the activity, the model may get very specific and very quantitative. If we're trying to break a 2-hour marathon, for example, we're going to look at biochemistry and genetic level sort of analysis. Our models, obviously, and again, these are very conceptual. Our models, oh, got back one. Our models help resource allocation. So for our F1 program, as an example, physical's important, don't get me wrong. But you ain't getting around that track in a VW bug, you know. So when you look at the line items in the budget, you'll see how the resource allocation works. The car got to go before we put the fittest driver in the car. So is this kind of making sense to you? Again, I'm trying to give you a conceptual framework for how we manage talent, manage world-class talent, and how we take people who are already really good at what they do and push them to that next level. This isn't about being top 10 in the world. This is moving from 3rd in the world to number 1 in the world. And this kind of analysis and kind of rigor is required because you can't leave many stones unturned, as you guys would all be fully aware when you're really trying to push that sort of top level. So if in a process sort of framework, we create this model, this unbelievably inspiring model of what it's like to be world-class in this particular field, whatever it is. We then obviously benchmark against that. We do something, and that's something I think we're really good at. We do something quick. We just want to go and try something. If it doesn't work, we stop and try something else. And then we reevaluate. But fundamentally, it comes down to understanding the people we're working with at a really unique and almost soulful level. Trying to know who they are, trying to get them to understand who they are, trying to develop programs that support their dreams, challenge their weaknesses, and really give them the opportunity to become what their potential is. So, as I said, the model may look like that for a very hypothetical, very inspirational person. We would benchmark you against that, and then obviously that starts to build your plan. So, we'll start to get into it. So if we talk about it, and as we've done this research and as we've looked around, we try to keep things very, very simple. So in skill development, we break it down really into 5 basic areas. If we can get these things right, we can get people to do anything. Do you agree? Obviously, most of the crew turn up are motivated, so that's usually not an issue for us. But it can become later in the career. We obviously want to give them opportunity to practice. We want to give them a chance to progress and progress aggressively. Feedback is critical. Failure is absolutely paramount to excelling at the best, to become the best in the world. Does that make sense? So as an example, I thought I'd throw in a little bit non-Stratos stuff. I'll show you a quick clip of someone whose whole program was based on this, and then we'll talk about how Stratos related. This is a program we set up about 5 years ago.
Was an absolutely perfect landing for Robbie Madison. He nailed that one. The sweet spot we talked about. He made it look so easy.
So New Year's Eve, Las Vegas, Main Street there. He's got to execute on cue on New Year's Eve. Now, nationally broadcast, so there's no room for error in terms of timing or delay.
As if 10 stories skyrocketing into the air isn't enough.
Robbie was leaning out and he was looking down, and the weight of that motorcycle alone would terrify a normal human being. But Robbie's so confident as he goes to the edge of that 100-foot drop.
Right now he's trying to find 3rd gear. Because as funny as it sounds, if you come off in 2nd, the rear wheel will lock off, you crash. If you come up in 4th, you have no control. So he's sitting up there trying to figure out which gear he's in. Okay.
He did it!
volume of that. That's good. So, how did we get him there? Well, progression, repetition, feedback, ability to fail, all those cool things. So that's a sound stage that you see at the big concerts, and where they have all the lights hanging off it, and then they just crank them up to raise the lights to the top of the roof. So we just raised it 10 feet at a time. It's progression, repetition, feedback. Obviously, you get pretty good feedback. If you don't make it, you don't make it. But yeah, there's actually a room for safety too. There's a big foam pit behind him and everything. But you get the general idea. So Stratos. You saw the capsule there, and then this is some of the images. And the image of the capsule had up there was, you call it situational awareness, we call it feedback, whatever works. Amazing structural integration of the camera systems. Was it 19, Art? 19 high-definition cameras on that platform, telling us everything that Felix needed to know about his situation, allowing us to have good awareness of the space, and obviously providing feedback. Of course, we were really concerned about this from the whole marketing perspective, but obviously the throwback for us was this is never before seen images, and people over and over again commented that when they were watching that it felt like they were right there. We've got more feedback about the ability of people to share in the experience and how magic that was than pretty much anything else. So it applied across the board. And then obviously failure. Second manned flight where the capsule came in a little hot and busted up, and then the failed balloon launch on the last manned balloon flight. Again, a huge part of our program was pushing, failing, reassessing, pushing, failing, reassessing. Nothing new to you guys. But I do know, even in our organisation, who has a high tolerance for risk, that eventually the leadership started getting a little bored of that. They were like, hey, come on, when is this thing going to actually happen? And so it was an active part of, especially of our program, to continually reinforce and talk about risk and how we manage it and how we do it. And I'll speak to a little bit more about that at the end. Nutrition. Our nutrition program actually very sophisticated, and these are just some examples. Actually, they didn't come up real well, but we do a fairly sophisticated set of blood paneling across all the athletes, and now all the musicians and artists, looking for parallels, looking for similarities amongst high achievers. Also, specifically for each athlete, trying to understand where the opportunity lies to get that extra little bit out of them. And this program, I think the origins was actually developed at NASA, as I understand, years ago. Now it's turned into a fairly common part of our program. Every athlete goes through it. This is Felix's numbers here, and we made small, subtle changes to his diet as a part of his training regime, and the results spoke for themselves. He improved dramatically as a course of it. So again, the best part about this is we have so many world-class athletes and musicians and talent that we're starting to create a fantastic database of things that seem to be similar amongst these groups and not so similar. Most of the stuff we're seeing is most of the diets are really bad. So small little movements to make it and recorrect are really proving off and paying high dividends. And I see in the future very quickly the point where we shift beyond just resetting and recorrecting and rebalancing the diets to some of these new organic compounds and derivatives that are coming out to actually accentuate some of the characteristics we're looking for elite performers. Here's some old slides, and I just threw these up because, again, speaking from the reference of the global performance program and how we funneled that into the Stratos platform, years and years of research into blood and training and cardiovascular strength training and numbers out the back, I tell you. The guys who take care of all this stuff are fantastic at pulling all this together. So it was that sort of platform and that sort of ability that we managed and brought to the program, which then allowed us to have a very simple framework to get Felix in the best shape of his life. And there it is. Guys, again, you'll be very familiar with some of this. It's a basic framework by which we actually push physical excellence in the program. I won't get into the details here, but you know that's a standard sort of threshold-based cardiovascular challenge test that gives us lactate at certain workloads, which allows us to form training loads and heart rates, et cetera, et cetera. Very standard stuff. We cross-reference his data as a stationary or in a controlled environment with the data we were collecting from the manned balloon flight. So you've got 1, 2, and 3, Felix's data, and you can see the heart rates and respiratory rate and that sort of information there. That was added back into all that portfolio of data that we have on all the other athletes in the program, and then obviously we then built his plan, and then at the final stages just doing some specific work to obviously help him move in the suit. And the wonderful thing about those programs, they're so simple, they're so effective, and they bang, bang, bang. Because again, we're not trying to make him a marathon runner. We're shooting for that target in terms of vision, but using those techniques that world-class Olympians may use takes a normal person, and they get fit very, very quickly and very efficiently. It's all about time. The psychology, obviously, this was the one that got a lot of press with the challenges Felix had with the suit and the rest of it. And again, we have a fairly strategic approach to this. Overall, again, pooling the psychological research and investigations we can from all our talent to try and define those characteristics that separate the world-class abilities. Our basic program in the psychology framework has the nutrition piece, which you saw some slides from before, the mind, which is more the behavioural assessment and awareness and training that we do, and then the brain, which is the mechanics, the wiring. So this is a simple system we use, QEEG, very common, not widely regarded as a very efficient or accurate training tool, but as we've started and as many of the groups that we're associated with have started, they are getting to the point where the analysis and the mathematics and the ability to dig into this data is getting to the point where we can actually define and look in it closely at what this means. And so even though we don't have a high level of reliability and validity in the actual assessment using the Q platform right now, or when we started, which was 4 or 5 years ago, since we've added the portfolio of talent, we're starting to see trends and patterns, and we're actually seeing some very unique abilities and patterns and signals that are giving us a lot of promise for training. And then when we back that with training in this space, we're actually seeing some remarkable improvements in some of the athletes. These are kind of made up, so that one always gets a laugh. Seriously, we don't really know yet. We're at the forefront of this, but that's the idea, isn't it? If we wait until it's published in some scientific research paper, the rest of the world will be kicking our butts. We have to do, and we have to play, and we have to test and push in these spaces so that we're at the front and the rest of the world is looking for us and chasing us. And the ideal thing with world-class talent, is what you realize very quickly, is that the generalized data, and I'm really beating up on the scientists today, that you get from the research papers doesn't typically translate very well, moving the very best at the top of the curve. Some things that people say don't have any impact sometimes have the greatest impact. Some things that have considerable, what you'd think to be the sort of have no impact, you'd give to one particular athlete and they go through the roof with it. So we basically don't look at the research other than for trends. We specify and individualize and characterize every platform based on that person. And if it works, it works. If a cattle prod, gets them going, a cattle prod gets them going. It doesn't matter what we're trying to achieve as long as it works for that athlete. So that's the framework from the sort of neural mapping that we're getting. It's, again, very busy, getting more simple all the time, but you get a sense of the idea of what we're looking for.
Yeah, you're waiting to see what the day will hold.
Ian Walsh, he didn't catch that many waves, but the ones he caught were the bombs.
My morning started, like I said, we got out there.
I want you to pay attention very closely to what he's saying.
My first wave.
And listen carefully to that.
I was a little bit too deep, and I tried to do these 3 pumps as I pulled into the barrel, and on the 3rd one, when I was in the barrel, I purled from the wave sucking up so much, and I just did a cartwheel through the barrel, head over heels, got whipped, and then I got held under for a pretty long time. That right when I popped up, I saw Jamie Sterling pulling into this huge barrel that was just unloading like 10 feet in front of me. And I got blown into the lagoon, and I couldn't really swim. I had 2 life jackets on, and I got drug over the reef into the lagoon, and then I was pretty much warm and ready. It was really crowded, so we were just kind of trying to be patient and only go on good waves, not really waste our time on the smaller ones that everyone was trying to battle for. You never know how big it could really be out there. It could You don't know if the swell didn't peak or it peaked overnight or if it's going to peak at noon, so just kind of anxious. That's the feeling.
The water there's about 4 feet deep.
We don't really care to go for a million waves. We're not here for that. We want to try to get the wave of the day.
The next wave was pretty much the best wave of my life. I thought it was a decent sized wave. I didn't think it was going to be like a gigantic wave or anything. The water was pulling so hard off the reef, and you're going against the grain, so it just feels like it's yanking you up the face, and you just got to hold your line. So I just leaned as hard as I could into my heels, and as it started to barrel when I was going into it, I remember it getting all dark. It felt like I was in the shadow of it. It felt pretty tall, but I couldn't really tell how tall it was. And I remember right when I made the turn in the barrel, and it just felt like I could fit like a school bus next to me. And then I saw from there the shock wave like shot up and was like hitting the back of my foot. I thought the wave was just gonna pass me by and eat me, and the foam ball was just gonna like annihilate me. You could die, but that's you wanna try to keep that in the back of your mind, not really in the front. You're just stoked you made it, and you're that close to falling, and those are always the best waves of your life when you think you're not gonna make it. You're like, oh, I'm too deep, I'm too deep, I'm too deep, and then you take a different line and the foam ball hits you and shoves you out. And that surprise is what makes it the best wave of your life. I was happy. 10 years ago, people would have saw a photo of that wave, thought, no way, that's even rideable.
So again, the theme and learning from all the best in class we have. I mean, surfers, people write them off pretty quickly, but what about what he says and what his approach there do you think demonstrates world class? He can recount everything in exact detail. So the sense that you know straight away is he was very present at that time. He remembers my heels were back, my toes were forward. He knows exactly what's going on. He's not like, oh hell, I'm gonna die. He's in the moment. He got wiped out on that reef, which is probably one of the deadliest places in the world to surf. And what did he do? Hey, I'm warm. I'm ready to go. On a world stage, he failed in front of everybody. But these guys and girls are so used to failure and picking themselves up when they fall over, that's just normal. Yeah, get back out there, have another go. So you'll be learning a lot all the time. And these are untapped potential in some of these athletes and groups and populations that have never been looked at in the way we're looking at them. It's just it's a privilege to be involved with them every day. Based on that, though, we obviously know that we're seeing the same old things come back around for about the 50 or 60 years. Any shrinks in the room? Yeah, this is like, I think, from the early BC years, I think this diagram's been run around. But it's reinforced over and over again. And a big part of Felix's program, and a big part of helping him understand how to push beyond when he was being faced with his challenges, was just the education. Everybody at a certain point, and a certain activity is going to get to a point of arousal where their behaviour and their performance starts to deteriorate. You'd all agree, correct? So, this is a normal phenomenon. This is the conversation we're having with Felix. This is what's going to happen. And our athletes and all these as soon as they understand it, okay, it becomes more real for them. It's not this bogeyman in the back of their head sort of freaking them out. And so we spent a lot of time talking about how to use these tools and how to educate them so that they understood as well as we did what was going on with their bodies. I talked earlier about risk. The idea that perceived risk is high, actual risk is low, that doesn't get you anywhere, you know. It's a good training tool maybe, but you know, the idea of public speaking, the real risk is really quite low from a personal physical perspective. But the perception can be very high. That's why people get bent out of shape standing in front of crowds. On the other side of the coin, when it's high and you don't perceive it to be high, we start to kill people. It's dangerous. So just having these conversations about, okay, where do we want to be? We want to actually be right in here. We want to know the balance and the actual, but then as we do, we want to push out and beyond, because this is where the magic happens. The more you can understand the risk and the more your acceptance and perception of the risk, the more you can mitigate it, and that's where you really start to push beyond and beyond. So a large part of our program across both the athlete portfolio and even the organisational portfolio was to understand risk, and that the failure and all these pieces that go with innovation and pushing the limits are really a natural part of it. And it's never ending, it never stopped. It's not like we have one meeting, it's all good. keep going back to the well. Life skills and X factor. This is the area of our program which basically is our R&D. It's the area which we don't really understand. Why do certain people are able to do certain things at such a high level, and how do they do it, and why do they do it? And so what we try to do is look at life skills, X factor, and research into this space to try and pick that piece apart. And fundamentally, at the end of the day for Felix and the program, it was the area of life skills and X factor that really set him up for success. He came into the program as a base jumper, as a person who was solely responsible for their own safety and their own equipment. And typically he would go up, climb up a mountain, jump off, and there's usually one photographer there. He turned up to Stratos and there's 200 plus world-class people running around trying to help him do his job. And he suddenly realized pretty quickly he had to rely on everyone in that room to help him do what he needed to do, and he wasn't set up for it. So the conversations with Felix, and really the fundamental process for everyone in the program as things got tough, was this represented in this plaque we had made for him and then we put around the building. At this point in time, we'd all realized we were part of something pretty special and something amazing, and it was this conversation with Felix. It's like in 20, 30 years when you're sitting down having this, recounting this period of your life in front of your children or your grandchildren, how's that story going to be told? What are you going to say to them? And it seems trite, and people sort of go, really, is that what it was? But when we really dug with him, we spent a lot of time talking to him about it. And the rest of the community around him and the rest of the team started to think about it. And we kept reinforcing that this was not going to happen again for any of us. Not like this, not right now. And how we behave now, how we conducted ourselves, how we presented ourselves, how we supported each other. This was all the conversations that we wanted to be having a positive light moving down the track. And I think as we look back, both Art and I, we think about all the wonderful people and the amazing journey it was, that the stories we're now telling back, even this close to the event itself, already reflect on a lot of the work we did in this space. And so basically, to wrap things up, I wanted to leave you with this kind of, go back one, sorry. Well, back two. Too quick on the draw. When we first started in this program, and even when I first came to the Rebel portfolio out of professional sports, Olympic sports, some military organisations, businesses, working with people in those realms, everyone's talking about 1% more and 2% more. What I realised was that at a certain point in time that there's all these other people running around doing these amazing things and we don't even know things squat about them. So it got me thinking. It was like, okay, if we think back at a certain point in time in our evolution, we're running around with sticks and rocks and we thought we were pretty evolved. Relative to today, we think of them as monkeys running around with sticks. If you throw that in reverse and push it forward, the idea that at some point in the future we'll look back on today and it'll be, wow, there are a bunch of monkeys running around with fancy phones. That to me then was an epiphany in terms of scream to the opportunity of what's the potential for individuals to perform at their very best. And I think, based on what I'm seeing, based on the research that we're hearing, and based on what these projects like Stratos and that are delivering, that there's unlimited potential for us to improve in what we're doing. And the 1% to 2% is, you know, that's out the door. And even that conversation has had a significant impact on our organisation. So with that, I'm going to finish up. I'm going to kick over to a bit of a video to kick off Art's section, but thank you for your time and appreciate you sitting here on a Friday afternoon listening to us.
That has moved the world.
The spirit of man has always been to try to go higher, deeper, faster.
I think I'm one of these guys who always wanted to be the first one on a place where no one has ever been before. I always wanted to be on top of something.
We're going into the next era in space.
If we can prove that you can break the speed of sound and stay alive, I think that's the benefit for future space explorations.
If something goes wrong, you're all by yourself. That is really scary. This is what I'm thinking about all the time.
You know, I've been working 4 years on this
I've been waiting 52 years for somebody to beat my record. It's been a long journey, and we're all delighted that we're finally at that final step.
Current status of the capsule is green, instrumentation's green, and medical is green.
Stand by. We're getting ready to your trip to space.
Roll the door open and engage the door stop, Felix.
Doors open.
Disconnect the oxygen hose.
Roger.
Atta boy. Stand up on the exterior step. Release the helmet tie-down strap. Start the cameras. And our guardian angel will take care of you.
Sometimes. Yeah, that's really high. How small you are. I'm going over.
Oh my god!
He's dead.
Oh god, he's...